Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Geaux247 podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Billy. Embody and Shea Dixon is with me. We appreciate you guys more than ever being here because LSU's now dropped back-to-back SEC games, including Saturday night's loss to Kentucky, a game that really wasn't close. But we're going to jump right in with the biggest news of the day, and that is star wide receiver Kayshon Boutte being out for the rest of the season. Shea, you were all over this one. Had it ready to go. Ed Orgeron kind of said, look, he's not available against Florida. But later on in the press conference we just got done with, confirmed that he is out for the season. And this one, you just, whether you're a fan, reporter, whatever, you hate to see it. I mean, Kayshon Boutte was off to a huge start to his junior year or his sophomore year, building off of that finish to his freshman campaign, and goes down in the second half against Kentucky with an injury that you could just tell when he went down on that ankle foot that it was just not good. And so Ed Orgeron confirms the news. LSU going to be without its arguably best player, without Derek Stingley out there for the rest of the year. And now this offense has to find even more ways to be productive. And losing Kayshon Boutte is the worst thing that you could have imagined in that respect.
Yes. So obviously, first off, thoughts, prayers with Keyshawn. I mean, that's tough. That's the best receiver in the country right now, and for him to be on fire again as a sophomore. Remember, he broke the SEC single game receiving mark. Had like 308 yards in one game as a freshman against Ole Miss. But I'm looking at my side screen right now. This year, I just had it. 38 catches, 508 yards, 9 touchdowns. His 9 touchdowns are still tied for the most in the country. A year ago, 45 for 735 and 5. So, he didn't even start till midway through a year ago, really, and really kind of just that very end of the season. But went over the 1,000-yard mark this year, as well into the double-digit touchdowns. So your hope there is, and I know, look, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the injury because O didn't and Keyshawn hadn't said anything, but I do. It's not an Achilles, is what I've been told, and a lot of people had speculated that because of how he went down and just sort of the area that it was in. But I think the hope, Billy, for him is that, look, you just go through a recovery process. You get back out there. You see if you're there for the spring. But, with a guy like him, either way, the goal is just to get him back healthy again to where he doesn't miss any more game action.
Yeah, so we'll be monitoring, obviously, his recovery now. It's going to be one of the big stories of the offseason, whether he's back or not for spring. Now
I'll chime in here. Billy, we had a rundown going and we wrote it before because we thought before Coach O went. We're recording this right after Coach O. So we're going to get to a handful of things, including some thoughts on O and the job status. And I said, let's just throw in there about Keyshawn. He'll update something quickly. But I do want to ask this. We can bring Maddie in for this vote too. You've got Jack Besh now as number 2 on the team in receiving if you're going by yards. And then after that, Brian Thomas. I probably could have quizzed LSU fans about this, and I'm not. It's been kind of so spread out, and Boutte's such the dominant explosive play guy that Brian Thomas is third on the team in catches, 14 for 188. Deion Smith, 11 for 186. Then you're into this Trey Palmer, Jure, Malik Neighbors is over 100 yards, and then Coy and Devonta Lee, who both are not yet over 100 yards on the year. But you've got that group. Coach O was asked today, hey, well, who's the new number 2 receiver? He said, it's not about that. It's about we need to just see some guys step up. So we got votes here, 2 guys apiece that you feel very good about being involved moving forward. Actually, let's do this. 1 guy not named Jack Besh. Y'all go first.
Maddie B, lead us off.
Jesus.
We can presume will be involved, no doubt.
Yes, 100%. I think it's between Brian Thomas and Trey Palmer. Honestly, I like Trey Palmer just as an explosive play threat that I think they need to supplement Kayshon Boutte's explosiveness, whether that's in the RPOs, slant games, all that stuff. And while Brian Thomas kind of gives you that, I think Palmer's speed is a little more valuable here. I'm probably going to go Palmer. Outside of him, though, there's a lot of candidates you could throw in there. Deion Smith, obviously. Malik Neighbors had made some plays as well. There's a lot of candidates, but I'm going to go Trey Palmer as my pick.
I'll go with Malik Neighbors. I thought what you saw against Kentucky is what they've been looking for from him. Again, another freshman who we heard good things about, was nicked up early in the year, and against Kentucky, that highlight reel catch was really impressive. He gives off, I don't know about Kayshon Boutte vibes, but that's the type of player he is. He's a big play guy. I think LSU's now seen what he can do a little bit more. And I think you look to Malik Neighbors to step up. He's kind of similar in that respect to at least kind of how Kayshon Boutte plays. So I'm circling him. And like Shea said, Jack Bech is going to continue to be a big focal point of the offense as well.
All right. I was going to go Neighbors. I think we've just seen a lot from him in a little amount of time to lead you believe that, in camp, remember, he was the guy that they were like, dude, he's the dog. All these guys are good, but he's the real, he's the best one at this stage. So I like him a lot. I guess if we'll all pick different guys because there's a lot of options. If you can harness that one game Deion Smith had into any sort of consistency, then he can be a guy for you. He can, he was compared to Justin Jefferson by the coaching staff. You clearly saw, I know the opponent was a weak one. Was that McNeese or Central Michigan that he had the big game? It was one of those games. I don't remember which one.
It was Central.
I remember
Central Michigan,
Central.
Right?
Either way, I mean, I know the opponent wasn't great, but he had a huge game for a freshman. I don't know. If you can find that again in Deion Smith, I think you'll be good to go. But no doubt, I think Jack Bech is the guy you rely on, and you figure it out. You've got some talent from there. We'll see.
Yeah, and moving off of this injury kind of update on Kayshon Boutte, Ed Orgeron did note, some other injuries, which we'll touch on in the press conference portion of this. But final thoughts on Kentucky. I mean, Matty B, you can chime in if you want on this, and then Shea. But for me, I mean, you look at the rushing performance by the Wildcats, kind of what you expected from them. They were physical. Chris Rodriguez had a big game. Will Levis was able to contribute in the run game as well. They just physically beat up LSU, and it kind of looked like that UCLA game to me. It wasn't necessarily surprising, but the LSU defense just had no answers and didn't really tackle well. And that's something that, six games in now is probably the most, I think, concerning thing outside of how the offense, reacts to this Kayshon Boutte injury.
Yeah. The thing for me, I asked Coach O on the presser before the game how similar the run game was to UCLA, and he said it's very similar as far as with the zone run schemes and the pulling guards, and that was alarming to me because while I think UCLA had a better run game overall, Kentucky still was persistent and physical, and I think that was going to give LSU problems. I didn't know it was going to give them that many problems though, and that looked like a defense that was just worn down, just really showed a lot of the same problems that they showed early in the year. And I made a real quick video on this on Twitter, but it felt like it was finally the dam bursting, right? Like the Central Michigan, Mississippi State wins were really just facades and really just teams that this team was just more talented than. And, Mississippi State was easy to game plan against. When you get up against a good team that executes well, that schemes well, LSU really just doesn't stack up to them because they're just out coached. And I said going into the game, I thought this was a game that that was going to be decided by the coaching on both sides, and it was. And I didn't think LSU really stood a chance out there. And I don't think that was because of injuries. I don't think that was because of talent. I just think that they were out executed, out schemed.
Well, I'm curious then to hear your Thursday podcast with Sonny, given that Dan Mullen can scheme up somebody about as good as anybody in the country. So
the spread is like 10 right now. So the expectations
are 11.
Are somewhere around there. It's around, so expectations are lower.
I'm with you, Billy, on the run game. I thought it was good to finally see TDP run hard. I mean, into the fourth quarter. Look, you can't say these guys are out there quitting. At least not a lot of them. Boutte's out there risking season-ending injury in the fourth quarter of a game that doesn't matter. Like they weren't going to win, and he's toe-tapping sideline, catches. TDP was running hard all the way till the end. And look, I hear it. People are going to say, well, Kentucky sat back and knew they were, not going to stay committed, or we're just going to allow them to run the football. And they got up big and they just didn't want to get beat by the big pass. So they were letting LSU chunk it. And I mean, that might be fair, but at the same time, throughout the game, LSU is running these gap scheme, a lot of pull and guard, getting Jack Mashburn, kind of a true blocking tight end into the game. They went under center at one point. So, I mean, they were committed in that game to running the football like we had not seen them be committed to running the football in a way that suits what Ty Davis-Price can do well. And I think we saw Ty, it was the best game of his career. I think 20-plus carries for 140-something yards and 2 touchdowns. I think that's his first 2-touchdown game of his career. But look, at the same time, it's one of those things you lost. And as soon as you brag about the running game, as Matthew says, you look to the other side, and Kentucky has 2 guys go over 100 yards, as if it's not that hard to do. So I don't know, man. For LSU's sake, I hope that they can find some sort of, I think balance in this offense when we used to talk about they need to find some balance. They need to run the football. With Kayshon out, they absolutely have to find a way to run the football or they're going to run into some trouble, because he was the guy that was bailing them out of a lot of situations when they would get into him. And I would say he and Jack Besh are your 2 most consistent playmakers on that side of the ball. You take one of them away from an offense that still hasn't scored more than 28 points against a Power 5 team this year and has only beaten 1 Power 5 team. That's a tough outlook.
Yeah. And now we, coming off of the Kentucky loss, the noise around Ed Orgeron is deafening, whether he wants to, he's not looking at it or whatever he said today in the press conference about just doing his job and staying focused. And he said it after the game. He's not going to have a bad day being the head coach of the LSU Tigers. But Shea, I mean, you hit the nail on the head on Geaux247 for our subscribers right after the game, really, or on Sunday too. This is not a program right now that is ready to make a change at the head coaching position in the season. We'll see kind of how things unfold, and we'll keep monitoring it. But right now is probably not the time, no matter how much the fans want it and how much it's probably warranted at this stage. This situation with Ed Orgeron is one that, at this point, we could see it playing out until the end of the year. And we can also see a change being made at some point. So just kind of set the table for the rest of the year for these LSU fans listening, as far as what the situation is with Ed Orgeron, at least in your mind and what you've gathered so far.
Well, look, I think that if you're a fan right now, you've come to a realization that a change is going to happen. Now, whether that, I haven't heard any fans say at this point to me on our message board anywhere that they think that there will be no changes. Now, if you're operating under, okay, well, I'm a fan, I think there's going to be changes. I want answers on when. I want answers on what it means for recruiting. What does it mean for the staff? What kind of coach are they going to go after? And all of this, these are dominoes that have to drop in a certain order. You're not going to get these answers until the domino drops of a coaching change. Then you can see if players are coming or going in terms of the transfer portal. Then you can see what a new coaching staff might look like and what, current staff members might be retained. You can see what, their recruiting finish might look like, or obviously what a new staff would look like. And I think you're in that kind of period right now where the team's not playing well and everyone's sort of just trying to find out a way for fans to make it fun to talk about LSU right now. And for them, the excitement is around, okay, what does the future hold? And look, the future will happen whenever we get some facts out of this. Right now, everything's speculation. And we heard Orgeron say, I'm still the head coach. Now, whether that happens in season or after the season, I think remains to be seen. I can hear an argument for a number of different, potential outcomes. You look at Woodward's track record outside of really one big name, Tyrone Willingham, who was let go midseason. They were 0-7 at Washington, and then he finished out the season as the head coach. Every other big coaching move he's made in a major sport has been right after the season. Now, again, look, people will then say times change. There's an early signing day now. There's the transfer portal. There's an open USC job and the arms race to hire people. I get all of that. I hear it. But for me, the answer right now is sort of one of those as, for instance, like us three, we are here to cover it and we're here to report on it, but certainly not be like a part of the actual process of it all. So we'd be lying if we sat here and said, here's where Scott Woodward is exactly in his line of thinking, or what they want to do, or what the administration boosters are doing in terms of lining up, which is a difficult thing here. Look, $20 million buyout, guys. A school that's in the middle of a Title IX investigation, a school that, is coming off of a national championship just 2 years ago and now finds himself, 8-8 across that stretch this year, 1-3 against Power 5 teams. do you just immediately rip the Band-Aid off when you're dealing with the highest paid employee in the state of Louisiana? No. So I'm not surprised that Ed Orgeron's still the head coach. I won't be surprised if he's still the head coach next week and so forth. But I'm also kind of with everybody else in understanding that we're probably nearing a stretch right now where, change seems inevitable.
Well, the bright side is for LSU fans looking ahead to a potential coaching search is that the last 3 coaches hired have all won national championships at LSU. It's, I think, the only job in the country that can say that.
No doubt.
No doubt. So that's a bright side looking forward. If you're trying to find one, is that whenever there's a coaching search, and Scott Woodward has done a really good job with them in the past, that's certainly a bright side. And now let's move on to what's next. LSU faces Florida, little 11 a.m. kickoff in Tiger Stadium on Saturday. A rarity certainly for this game. Also a rarity that LSU's double-digit dogs in Tiger Stadium. But Ed Orgeron was pressed a lot, I think, on his job status and how he's handling it in not only his post-game press conference, but today as well. And like we said earlier, he's just going to keep handling it the way he has, which is, he's never going to have a bad day. He's focused on fixing the things they can, try to fix. And I think looking at his press conference today, it was pretty easy to kind of read through everything. They've got to find an answer for Kayshon Boutte's absence. They're probably not going to find one in reality. It's going to be a committee approach and see if the cream rises to the top. But I think he handled the press conference and what was asked of him a lot better than he kind of has during this rocky stretch. I mean, I was kind of impressed with the way he handled, continue to be being pressed for, a soundbite, quite honestly, on his job status. And, as you look at Ed Orgeron and what he said about Florida, a lot of respect. Dan Mullen has taken them to school at times. And even when Dave Aranda was the defensive coordinator here. So whether it's first-year defensive coordinator Durante Jones or Dave Aranda, Dan Mullen and this Florida offense presents a lot of challenges. Emory Jones played a really good game against Vanderbilt. I mean, quite honestly, not many people aren't having good games against Vanderbilt. This is still a Florida team that has a lot in front of it. They still need to face Georgia. You can tell they're going to be motivated coming into this one and looking to show the country, quite honestly, that loss to Kentucky was a bump in the road.
Yeah, look, and I kind of in jest was messing with Matthew earlier about what he's going to say on the prediction pod, but Mullen is one of the best schemers in the country. And in terms of how to attack a defense, look, they were beating up on LSU with Felipe Franks as the quarterback, with, guys who aren't playing as well as Emory Jones. So I have no doubt that Florida is going to put up some points. My worry becomes, Billy, and we'll talk about this now, with LSU sitting at 3-3 in last place in the SEC West, and they've yet to score more than 28 points in a game against a team. 28 points in a game against a Power 5 opponent this year. I'm looking at the schedule right now remaining. I can name you 3 or 4 teams immediately, at least 2 or 3, that are going to score 28 by halftime on you. That's just what they do. So I don't know, man. Being an 11-point underdog at home against Florida 7 games into a season says exactly what it needs to say about what the outcome of this game will probably look like for an LSU team that not only is just not playing well, and we can, and certainly the coordinators have been knocked on at different times for their approach, but they're dropping like flies too. I mean, their best players are not playing. Kayshon Boutte, Derek Stingley, Andre Anthony, Miles Brennan from the start, John Emery. I mean, there's not a lot of reason for me to say they get Glenn Logan back. Like he's a great player, and I love Glenn. But you get my point. They're reeling right now, and if they don't have answers right now, and they're losing more of their best players every week, the product's not going to be expected to be getting a lot better.
Yeah, and you mentioned dropping like flies. Ollie Gay is going to be out. Major Burns remains out. Joe Evans unavailable. It's just
stop the count. Stop the count.
I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I mean, this is a team right now that I was asked last week on a radio show, if LSU loses to Kentucky, can they win another SEC game the rest of the way? And gosh, that was before Texas A&M beat Alabama this weekend. This is, we can move into this now.
Put it to a vote. Let's hear it, Billy. Bring Matty B in. He ain't ducking out of this one.
I am going to say
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Let's lay the land for the people out there while y'all think about it. Florida's an 11-point underdog. Then they're at Ole Miss. Ole Miss obviously scores a lot of points a game. Bye week at Bama versus Arkansas, who everyone by now knows that Arkansas is a very good football team this year, versus ULM, so they have a non-conference game remaining, and then at home against Texas A&M. A week ago, everybody said Texas A&M sucked. This past weekend, they're beating Bama, so that's 6 more games. They're 3-3. What's everyone I'm going to assume is going to say they can beat ULM. So you're starting 4 wins with 5 other games.
I will say I'm going to go ahead and I mean the only one is I think maybe they can find a way to beat Arkansas, but gosh, Arkansas is just so physical. I mean that's at least one. They didn't look like the Arkansas team that started out this season against Georgia, but gosh, not many teams have looked good against Georgia. I that would be my one pick. I mean, maybe Florida this weekend, they can shock the world, but I just don't see it. I don't see another SEC win on this slate. I mean, maybe Zach Calzada gets hurt and A&M is left without
walk-ons.
Yeah, that would be other things would have to happen for me to predict LSU to get another SEC win this year. I'm gonna go winless. And I mean, Shea, you mentioned the Ole Miss scores a ton of points last year, 53-48 with Steve Ensminger and Scott Linehan, Max Johnson in the final game of the season. LSU puts up 53, and I don't see that happening this year. And I'm going to predict they go winless.
For me, Mississippi State, Auburn, and albeit Kentucky's ranked 11th, and they deserve, they're a good team, obviously. Mississippi State, Auburn, and Kentucky might be the 3 worst teams of these last, 9? I mean, other than obviously ULM. Like Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Florida, Bama, Arkansas, A&M. I might take all 5 of those over the 3 teams that LSU has played so far in SEC play. Like, it just doesn't get any easier. That's what made the Auburn loss so bad. That's what made it so pivotal. Like, you can't lose to Auburn with the other teams on this schedule still in play. And that's what I thought made the Kentucky game so big, because I thought, well, Kentucky, I knew, again, Kentucky's a good team. I don't think they're this juggernaut team I don't think they're better than Ole Miss or Alabama, Arkansas, maybe not even Florida, even though they beat Florida. Like, you could say they got outplayed by Florida for a majority of that game. I'm going to say 1. I think they get 1, and I think it's the Texas A&M game at the end, just because I don't trust A&M, even though A&M's defense is great. And, as we saw, they beat Bama. So it's hard to say this after they beat Bama. But being at home, we saw last year, 3-5 team had no business going to beat Florida and beating Ole Miss. They end up winning those 2 games. I don't think we're going to see that this year. But at the very least, I think they go and beat A&M in the last game of the season, because I think A&M is going to start to taper off a little bit more. They're going to come back down to earth after that Bama win. And I don't think they're a great team, especially with Calzada and whatnot over there.
Matty B, you haven't arrived until you have your own thread on the Texas A&M message board, and if they listen to this podcast, you might get one. And I am the biggest, like, A&M has to prove it. They've had all these expectations going into this year. This year was supposed to be their year, and they started off the way they did, and then they go and beat Bama. Is that the turning point? Are they now going to be rolling?
Yeah, I don't want to
out, but
I don't want to turn this into A&M podcast, but I just don't. I think they're more of the team that lost to Mississippi State and to Arkansas and barely beat Colorado than the team that beat Bama. They beat the hell out of Bama, though. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. So shout out to them.
Look, okay, so what, you're going for
5 and
5
7
wins?
5 and 7.
Okay, Billy, you went 4 and 6. Okay. I'm going to go 6 and 6. I think that they end up beating. I don't think that they'll lose a game after Bama. I think that they'll end up beating Arkansas. I'm not sure how. I just get a feeling that game's all.
Well.
Even when LSU's been way better, Arkansas has given them a run for their money. So that game's just kind of like Auburn to me. It's always a little funky. You get them at home. They'll beat ULM. I'm with Matty B. Even last week, like before the Bama game, even the Billy Lucci's of the world were saying, look, guys, it ain't A&M's year. They're not This ain't it. It's going to be rough. Look, it's close games against Colorado. It's losing to State and Arkansas. I know you thought you were going to be cream of the crop, but that ain't it this year. They're too banged up. They lost their quarterback. They play out of this world in front of an awesome home crowd. I mean, everyone here can hate on the Aggies all they want. An awesome environment, an awesome end to an unbelievable college football day for everybody that was at LSU. So it was, great day, great game for them. But again, they're still this teams that they had just barely beaten or lost to. End of the year, last game, few of these seniors are going out for their final time. I could easily see them beating it. I don't think A&M's that good either. So in none of that do I want to argue that I think LSU is very good. But I'll say that. I think they'll lose to Florida, lose to Ole Miss, bye week, they'll lose to Bama, then they'll win the rest of the three. So I'm kind of split. I say they're going to lose their next three, and then the sun will rise in November, and they'll get themselves a few wins. 6-6, which another 500 finish.
So Ed Orgeron gets carried off the field against Texas A&M.
This ain't 2016, no 15.
2015.
Yeah, this is an odd year, 2015, right? Gosh, that seems like yesterday when Les was being carried off. All right. And I hope nobody's tuning in here just at the end and is hearing that we've predicted that an Ed Orgeron carried off the field, Les Miles remake.
I'm definitely gonna clip this. This is gonna be the clip,
No,
it's gonna be on Twitter. So there you go.
Do not. All right. So then we're going 4-6 or 4-8 to 6-6 range, which I think what we're all in agreement here is that these next three games probably are not going to be pretty for them.
No, I don't think so. And Florida again has a lot in front of it still. Obviously, it's a game that they probably feel like they should have won last year. I mean, the Cole Taylor shoe and the kick in the fog. I mean, it was another wild game between LSU and Florida. I could see it being closer than the 10-point spread that it is right now. But I just don't. I can't see them beating Florida this week. I mean,
Florida's a good football team.
Florida's a good football team. They're going to be more physical than LSU, and with LSU as banged up as it is, I don't see it. And so, Shea, I think we're going to be back here next week on a Monday talking about another LSU loss, the Wardle meltdown, be demanding more answers.
This is when LSU ends up winning, though. That's just how it works.
Exactly. I know. That's what.
This is where LSU will come out and just beat Florida by 7-10 points.
Yeah, and it's both teams are not obviously where they wanted to be going into this year, but Florida still has a lot ahead of it. I mean, the heat could turn up on Dan Mullen if he loses this one. I don't think they're going to do anything with him by any means. But if he loses to this LSU team, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, it might not surprise me, but LSU is just way too banged up right now. I mean, how do you even score? I mean, the defense would have to play lights out, and how do you even score enough to get there without Kayshon Boutte now? It's a tough road. There's no doubt.
A reminder. Well, LSU's 1-0 at 11 a.m. this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So that's looking up for Saturday. And then next week, Ole Miss, 2:30 CBS, the big boy slot for LSU to go to Oxford. I'm a little surprised by that.
Yep. No, I know. 2:30 in Oxford on CBS. Little Lane Kiffin, Ed Orgeron, maybe for the last time. We'll see. But for Maddie B, for Shea Dixon, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Geaux247 podcast. Check back later in the week for the preview of LSU Florida, 11 a.m. kickoff in Tiger Stadium on Saturday. We will have all your coverage of that. And we'll also be tracking recruits. We've talked about it in the past, but that'll be something to monitor as the season unfolds as well, and if the coaching change is made. So keep it locked on Geaux247.com for all of that. Basketball season is approaching as well. So we'll have that all covered for you guys. But for Shea Dixon, Maddie B, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Geaux247 podcast, and we'll catch you next time.